Let me go ahead and give you an acronym that we teach in our Best Facts book. So the Best Facts book is a way for Christians to grow in some really basic arguments for their faith. And in the end, we have the Tall Tales acronyms, why to reject other faiths. And the TALES stands for evolution. And it goes like this. The transitionary evidence is lacking. The apparatus is insufficient. Life can't come from non-life. The existence of information is naturalistically inexplicable. And the start of the universe is too. Real simple. You cover all of those topics in this book. So let me ask you a few questions about some of those different topics. First, Dr. Sue Dykes was amazing. And we're grieving with your recent loss of this coworker and one of the co-authors in this book. Her chapter on the hominin fossils covered some of these issues. So just point blank, does the transitional record prove evolution? Because that's the argument that people are going to hear in high school.
The short answer to that is no, it doesn't prove evolution. Now, you can develop an evolutionary interpretation of the fossil record, but you could also develop an interpretation of the fossil record that is compatible with a creation model. In fact, even prior to Darwin, there were paleontologists who were men and women of faith. Louis Agassiz would be one example, who saw the fossil record as a series of progressive creation acts where God is creating, these organisms going from simple to complex in a progressive, purposeful manner. And so you can view the fossil record as really reflecting a history of life on Earth that's divinely orchestrated. And just a couple of features of the fossil record that, to me, I think are much more compatible with a creation model approach than with an evolutionary model approach. Every time you see what you might call biological innovation in life's history, where suddenly we see life going from one regime of complexity to another, it happens explosively. It happens without any kind of evidence for intermediary grades. It's you just see these explosive events that, to me, look like creation events. So just a few examples. When it comes to the origin of life, the very first cells on Earth, these first cells show up suddenly without much of an opportunity for an evolutionary history, a chemical evolutionary history. And these very first cells are incredibly complex, metabolically speaking. And again, they just show up out of nowhere. Or when we see the emergence of what are called eukaryotic cells. This is another cell type that is very critical in biology. It's the cell type that lays the foundation for multicellular organisms like plants and fungi and in animals. These show up explosively. This is called the eukaryotic Big Bang. When it comes to the origin of body plans and animal phyla, we have the Cambrian explosion, which again is a dramatic event in a geological instance where out of nowhere, all these different animal forms show up in the fossil record. And so there are, when it comes to the history of animal life on Earth, there are these radiation events where, again, it's an explosive diversification that's taking place in a geological instant. Even when human beings appear on the scene, there's an explosive appearance of, out of nowhere, of incredibly sophisticated behavior in language and music and art that we could understand as, manifestations of the image of God. And so that particular pattern in life's history is not what I would expect, in an evolutionary, framework. And another really quick point is people will, point to so-called transitions in the fossil record as, again, evidence for an evolutionary history. And we do indeed see these forms that could be understood as transitional forms. But when we look at the transitions, like the transition going from whales to, or wolf-like creature to whales, or if we see the transition going from a lobed finned fish to a land-based animal, a tetrapod, these transitions are happening very rapidly, and the so-called transitional forms are co-occurring in the fossil record. They're not appearing sequentially where everything is out of order and out of whack, when we look at the transitions. So the rapid nature of those transitions and the fact that, again, we don't see a sequential nature to it to me is problematic. And many times people will point to, again, these forms that they call transitional that have a mosaic of features, like a combination of features that they argue is reflecting kind of an intermediary state in an evolutionary sense. And the fact of the matter is, you could understand mosaic designs as being the handiwork of a designer. There's many things that we produce that are a mosaic of designs. We're all familiar with smartphones, for example, and we take for granted really, smartphones. But I'm old enough now that I can remember when, people had cell phones, people had digital cameras, people had iPods, maybe you might have an internet device. And so these were separate devices that were essentially melded together into smartphone technology. Well, a smartphone is a mosaic of these basic designs that were intended to do specific things. And so when we see, a creature that appears to be a blend of a lobe-finned fish and a land-based animal, well, this is a creature that's ideally designed to live at the water's edge, right? And it's a mosaic of designs where each design is able to do something highly specific, and you're bringing it together in a single organism to allow that organism to be, again, able to exploit both environments, the aquatic environment and a terrestrial environment. So you could see, again, these mosaic designs as really being, again, something compatible with the work of a creator. And the bottom line is that we do see these rather impressive examples of transitional forms, but these are rarities, actually. More often than not, we see a dearth of transitional intermediates in the fossil record. And many times what we see is stasis, where organisms appear and they remain unchanged for tens of millions of years before they disappear and go extinct. So stasis, as opposed to evolution, is more dominant in the fossil record, which is consistent with the creation model, I believe.
I think it was Stephen Jay Gould that said the lack of transitional forms is the trade secret of paleontology. So kind of exactly what you're reminding of us of here.
Great quote.